Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll give everyone a few seconds to catch the live. We are so excited that you're here with us this evening. My name is Stephanie. My name is Stephanie, and I'm with the Novel Neighbor. We are an independently owned and operated bookstore in Webster Groves, Missouri. And if you're not from St. Louis, Webster Groves is a suburb of St. Louis. And if you are from St. Louis, you know where Webster Grove is. But we are so excited that you are here this evening. We have an amazing event that I have been looking forward to for months now. And so I will get us started. We have two authors joining us this evening. So not just one, two amazing authors. They are huge middle grade authors and some YA. We've got some YA mixed in with this, but our focus tonight is middle grade. So we are so excited they are here. The first person is James Riley, which is the New York Times bestselling author of so many things, including Half Upon a Time, the Story Thieves series, which I know is particularly popular at the Novel Neighbor, and the Revenge of Magic series. And contrary to what you might have heard, he is real, and he is not the character Nobody from Story Thieves. So we're setting the record straight this time. James was born in Connecticut, but he only lived there for a short time before moving to a bunch of states, but he now is coming to us this evening from the East Coast. He currently lives in Northern Virginia with his 3 cats. So, James, we are so lucky, is here this evening to lead a conversation with Amanda Foody, who has many books, but the one we're really focusing on is Wilderlore, which just came out on Tuesday. So it is only 2 days old, so happy book birthday. And Amanda has always considered imagination to be her best attempt at magic. And if you are listening tonight to Wilderlore, you'll know that that is true. After working as an accountant for a multinational corporation, she now spends all of her free time brewing and fermenting foods, which maybe we can ask her about later. And she lives in Boston with her bunch of books. Who can relate to that? And she also has her own cat, Jelly Bean. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our two amazing authors so that they can lead us in an awesome conversation, and then we will take some question and answers from you. And before I bring them on, I want to make sure that you know that you can purchase all of their books from the Novel Neighbor, and we even have signed book plates. So extra special thing if you order from us. So welcome, and please join me in welcoming James and Amanda. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. How are you both doing?
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, pretty well.
Good. Thank you for having us.
Okay, well, we already have lots of excitement, lots of love in the chat. People are so excited for all of your books. You're getting lots of shout outs. So you have some amazing fans watching. So I will take myself off the screen and turn it over to YouTube, but I'll be back for question and answer. And so for people watching, feel free to start dropping those questions in during the conversation. We'll collect them all and ask them at the end.
Cool.
Sounds
Amanda, nice to see you for the first
time.
You too. So we have a lot to talk about. Do you want to introduce Wilderlore first, which I've read and is amazing?
Thank you. So I've got a copy right here. So this is Wilderlore. The first book in the series is called The Accidental Apprentice, and it takes place in a world that is full of magical creatures. And if you form a bond with one of them, you can have a little bit of their powers yourself. And it follows the tale of Barkley, who comes from a village that is absolutely terrified of these creatures, which are called beasts. And Barkley accidentally one day forms a bond with one of these creatures, leading him to get thrown out of his town and sending him on an adventure through the dangerous woods in order to figure out how he can break his bond and return home.
I'm glad you said Barkley because I thought it was Barclay the whole time.
Okay, everyone who's been to New York and is familiar with the Barclay Station subway thinks that, and then everyone who hasn't been to New York knows it is Barclay.
Like Barclay sounds more like a name, but for whatever reason. And it also
I don't know who came up with the New York thing.
But you've written a lot of YA. right?
I have. Yeah, I had 4 YA books come out before Wilderlore.
Nice. And you have one coming out soon, right? Or
Yeah,
later
I
this
have
year?
another one coming out this November.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was it about middle grade that kind of appealed after all this YA?
Yeah, so I fell in love with reading when I was a kid. That is when, Magic Tree House, like those are the kind of books that I think really shaped me. And even as I write YA novels, I feel like if you were to ask me, like, what are the books that had the most influence on you and like what are still your inspirations to this day, it always ends up being middle grade books. It always ends up being books that I found as a kid. And so I always loved the idea of trying to write one myself. And as soon as I got the idea for Wilderlore and I really dove into it right away, I was like, this feels like coming home. It was new and so familiar at the same time.
It's so much fun. I kind of feel like middle grade is writing all ages almost. Like it's appropriate for kids like 7 or 8 year olds and up, but it can be read by anybody, and that's such
absolutely.
a joy. Yeah.
Yeah, especially I think growing up, my parents used to, if I really, really loved a book, they would usually read it with me. We'd have like kind of like a mini family book club. Nice. And I like to think that I had good taste as a kid because I don't think my parents would have lied to me about which books they liked and didn't like.
What were some of your favorites?
I loved anything by Cornelia Funke, like The Thief Lord, Inkheart, loved those books. I loved the Septimus Heap books. I was a big fan. I'm now much more of a fantasy person, but as a kid, I also read a little bit more broadly. Pretty much anything with mystery in it. I remember the series. I tore through all of those. I loved the Pendragon series and the Warrior Cat series. Those are 2 series that my dad voraciously read with me. Yes, I subjected him to the Warrior Cats. Yeah. No, actually, I didn't really have any pets growing up other than a handful of goldfish and a hamster or 2 at one point. As soon as I became a grown-up and I got my own apartment and everything like that, the first thing I did was adopt a kitten.
Me too. My dad was allergic to everything. And so as soon as I graduated college, I was like, dog. And then I discovered that cats were better and I moved on.
So do you have both now or do you just have cats?
No, my dog passed away, unfortunately. I mean, it's been like years. It's okay. I wrote her into one of my books. She turned into an assassin dog. She's just this cute little tiny dog.
That's what my cat aspires to be.
They all do, I feel like.
Yeah.
I haven't read Warrior Cats, but I always get it recommended because I have so many cats. So I kind of feel like I need to go back and read that.
I recently reread the first book. Yeah. All these years later. When I was ages like 9 through 12, there was a website called Neopets. Which had tons of games on it, but it also had this whole section called Guilds, which was basically, I did not know this terminology at the time, but was basically like online RPG, super nerdy stuff. And I had like whole Warrior Cats Guild from ages like 9 to 12 that I was like really, really invested in.
Okay, but so did that inspire Wilderlore in some way? Because I got kind of Pokemon vibes. A little bit. Okay,
so Pokemon was definitely the original inspiration. I was a huge Pokemon nerd as a kid. Honestly, Pokemon was actually probably how I learned to read. I remember I had my little Game Boy Color. It was a special Pikachu Yellow Edition one. And I would play the game like Pokemon Red or something every night with my mom when I was 4 years old. And, she would read like the dialogue to me in the game. And yeah, I still have this whole section of my brain that's like, I know when this Pokemon evolves and I could tell you what that gym badge is.
That's amazing.
And I still play the games. They're still really fun.
Oh yeah. Well, I got that vibe when Barkley enters the first kind of wilderness city. And I just got a Snorlax vibe because there's like a deer sort of beast asleep in the middle of the street.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Barkley does not have to play the Poke Flute to wake up the Snorlax, but there are definitely a lot of nods that I put throughout the book to Pokemon. I also really love the show, so there's definitely a few nods to the show as well. And it's really funny you say that because I feel like a lot of the people who worked with me over the process of publishing Wilderlore, like my agent and my editors, a lot of them aren't actually familiar like super familiar with Pokemon in the way that I am. So it's funny that somebody caught my Pokemon references. I really
Nice.
appreciate it.
I feel like I'm so happy because I was like, am I going to mention this? And she's like, no, I've never even heard of it. It's like, thank you.
No. I'm a huge Pokemon dork.
Amazing. My first book was about fairy tales, and my editor just had avoided fairy tales somehow. She'd never read them, so all the like classic fairy tales I was referencing, she's like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." It's like you've never heard of Cinderella. She just somehow had missed
It's
that
so
whole part of
funny.
childhood. So I'm with you on kind of having your references not sort of seen right off.
Yeah,
Um,
what is being an author if not having someone to always comment on your Microsoft Word document like your joke is so funny? Like, yeah.
you said, this seems like it's going to be a series. Do you have a set amount of books kind of planned out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be either 6 or 7 books long.
Nice.
It's pretty
Do
long,
you
longest series I've ever written so far.
do you have them all plotted out, or sort of?
Like roughly,
Yeah.
I know. So in the world of Wilderlore, the beasts don't live all over the world. They only live in 6 different regions, each one modeled after a different environmental biome, and they're called wilderlands. And so every book of the series is going to take place in a different wilderland. So the first book is in the woods, and then we get to explore other places from there. So I kind of knew with that setup going in that I wanted to see all 6 of them. I didn't want to leave any of them out. And so that set me up for 6. And then the question of the 7th is just whether or not I could wrap it all up, wrap it all up in time. And I do have them roughly plotted out more in just like, this is the big thing that happens in that book,
Yeah.
and also where that book takes place. So yes and no. Yeah, I mean, I do have a pretty I do have a pretty full document of plans, but it's so messy that I feel like I can't commit to saying yes because it could all change.
Yeah, of course. You might find some fun things along the way and just go off on tangents. That's what I always tell kids whenever they're asking, like, if you plot something out. I always use the analogy of like you're going on a road trip, so you like to know where you're going to go, like where you're headed. But if you find fun stuff along the way, you can take a little side trip.
Oh, absolutely.
My series.
Yeah, especially a series this long. I feel like it definitely
Yeah,
lends itself to a few detours.
exactly.
Yeah.
So how was that? How is the writing process different than writing like YA? Because I've never written YA. So educate me,
Ooh.
please.
Well, it was a lot shorter.
Yeah.
That was one thing that I appreciated off the back. My first draft of Wilderlore was, I think, 43,000 words, which is probably the equivalent of less than 200 pages, like maybe 150 pages, we'll say, if I'm guessing. And my YA have been known to get pretty lengthy at times. So it was really refreshing to feel like I had, I feel like sometimes when you start drafting a book, you have that, that spark and that drive, and you just are so excited about it and you plow through it. Typically when I was writing YA novels, I would have that same feeling, but I would eventually tucker myself out after a certain point in the story. And I feel like in this case, I could actually finish the book on the same high that I had when I started it, which was really rewarding. And apart from that, I wouldn't say it's too different. Not necessarily strictly because of the age category difference. I mean, both stylistically, the idea of character voice and being a very character-focused sort of method of storytelling, I think applies to both categories. But there are definitely differences between just like my specific brand of YA, which is typically, tons of different point of view characters, a big group cast, and all of that stuff. And in this case, it's Jess Barkley who tells the story. So that was a little bit of an adjustment as well.
Do you have any plans at the moment to switch point of views?
No, I do not. I considered it, but I think it makes sense for Barkley to be our narrator through the story. And actually, the second book at this point is basically finished as well.
Nice.
I'm sitting on all these secrets about what is to come.
Do you have a title?
I do, but I can't share it yet.
Simon & Schuster. Come on.
Yeah. It would also, I haven't been able to share the Wilderland either. It's been difficult. I can't even share any sneaky excerpts because I feel like it would give it all away.
That's fair. Do you have a publication date?
Not yet. It's going to be spring of next year.
Okay.
More than likely either March or April, just like this book was.
So not too long to wait.
Not too long of a wait. In fact, I do have a cover already. Yeah, the cover's all done. I'm actually currently finishing up my copy edits, which, for those of you who don't know, is like the final. It's like the proofreading stages. Fixing all my typos, of which there are many. So yeah, it's pretty much done at this point.
This is more of a personal question, but from your bio, it says you're an accountant for a multinational corporation. Is that exactly the same as being an author, basically?
You would think it is, but
naturally.
No, I did it. I majored in accounting in college, and I got my master's. After that, I worked in accounting for about a little less than 2 years before I was able to switch to writing full-time. And yeah, it's a little different, but I will say the Excel skills do come in handy. I still plot all of my novels on spreadsheets, as does my editor. Like, such a kindred spirit.
I thought that was a joke. I would avoid Excel.
If I could write novels in Excel, like, I absolutely would. Scrivener is a necessary evil for me.
You may be the only writer who's ever
I know. But
that's amazing.
I'll spruce it up, try to make it pretty, add some color, add some flair. There aren't really that many numbers in it or anything like that. It keeps me organized, though.
I mean, I'd read about that before I started reading the book, and I may have been reading into things, but Barclay starts in this town where everything is very, like, set in place. There are all kinds of rules, very multinational corporation. And then he breaks free of that, not really by choice, but ends up in this place that's much more imaginative, fantasy-oriented. I'm not saying there's a metaphor.
That's so funny.
Maybe
a little bit. It's funny because I did actually get into publishing, I would say, a little bit before I got into accounting, because I signed with my first agent my freshman year of college, at which point I think maybe I was taking my very first accounting class. So I think the imagination came first, and we'll say the accounting was a detour.
So you had written a book in college? Or before that, high school?
Yeah, my novel Ace of Shades, actually, it was actually my second book to come out, not my debut. But I wrote that while I was in high school. That was the one that kind of started my whole publishing journey. Ended up being published a little bit out of order, but that was sort of the book that started it all.
That's amazing, though. How did you kind of balance? We usually get a lot of, like, people who want to become writers, and they may be on the younger end of that. They might be entering high school. How did you balance, like, classes and maybe, like, after school activities while also writing?
Oh gosh,
I'm so impressed.
I was pretty intense, I would say. I think that I sacrificed a few things about my college experience. I wouldn't say that it was the most traditional. I graduated in 3 years. I only joined, like, one club, and tried to keep my course load as sort of pared back as I could. But I still had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, I think that, the class, like, let's say from Pokemon, like the Ash Ketchum character who, like, wants to be the like, very ambitious sort of character. Like, I related to those a lot as a child. I didn't have a lot of chill. I like to think I'm a little bit more so now, but I think a lot of my friends would still disagree.
You just gotta catch most.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned that you didn't used to read as much fantasy as you do now. But did you always want to write fantasy?
Yeah, it's funny because I read it as a kid, but it was just, I read everything, and now I am picky. I think, I don't know if it's a time thing or more just, I don't know, I was really content to explore more than I think I am now. Now I really know what I like, and it's, I think, what I always seek out, whether it's a middle grade book, YA book, or an adult book. Fantasy for all age categories is definitely what I love. I also think what drew me to writing fantasy, like, one of the things I love about fantasy is I love coming up with the world. I love all the details. I just love that element of the story. And that's kind of unique to fantasy, the whole made up world of your own. And pretty much everything I think I've ever drafted, even when I was a kid, was, if not fantasy, something in the speculative category.
So is that how it starts for you? It starts with like maybe like the idea of a world versus like the idea of a conflict or character that might.
Yeah, I would say I usually start with the world first. In this case, it was the idea simply of just, Pokemon, but a book series with obviously my own takes and my own spin on it. But yeah, I would say that most of the book ideas that I've had before this and since, they usually start with the world or the magic or something like that first. And then I sort of put my characters like set pieces everywhere else. The characters take the reins from that point forward. But in the very beginning, it's the world.
How long do you spend like building the world before you even start plotting or writing?
Honestly, not that long. It's funny because the accountant in me, I definitely identify as a plotter. I like to plot out all the major beats and moments of my story before I sit down to write it. But the characters and the world, I usually kind of leave myself to explore on the page. In this particular, usually also the way that I do it is when I first get the idea for a story, before I go to an outline, before I do anything, I will free write and just see what sort of comes to me. And so the very first, like half of the first chapter of Wilderlore, I wrote the exact same day that I got the idea. And much of it is exactly the same as it's been since that day, because it never changes that much because that was the foundation. It was the very first thing I did. So the idea of the character of Barkley, the character of Selby, the mushroom farming, all the silly little rules, that was sort of what I built the whole world off of from there. Yeah.
I'm sort of the opposite. Like world building, I usually cheat and I do like fairy tales, so the world is built in a lot of ways. Or my other series, Story Thieves, that's kind of in a different world, just has them jumping into fictional books that I make up at the drop of a hat. So it's much easier. But yeah, I struggle with world building. So to hear that it's really easy for you is amazing. And it's just like I'm over here like running a marathon, just like trying to come up with details. And you're like, just freeload. It's amazing.
I wouldn't necessarily say that like it's super, super easy, but it's definitely the part I have the most fun with. I will say my first drafts, though, of all of my novels, especially I think Wilderlore, which is full of so many tiny, tiny details. Draft is just like insert name here, like over and over and over again. There's so many things that especially in these books where I have to name like every species of beast and all these type of things. There's a lot of brackets happening. But I read one of your books over the weekend. I like voraciously read it this past Saturday. I read the first book of I read Revenge of Magic, which is is that the series title or the first book title?
Both.
Okay. So are you telling me that you did not actually start with the concept there? You started with the characters instead?
That one, I started with the concept of like, I want a school for magic that's run by the government, and therefore slightly different than Hogwarts or anything else, just to be as kind of realistic as possible with magic, which is, it's not realistic in any way, but it's like, I wanted to do magic as realistically as possible in our world. And I love the idea that like, it used to be around, and then on the same day, all around the world, there are these books of magic that show up, and anyone born on that day can use them and can read them, and no one else can. It was a cheat so that kids could be the ones using magic and adults couldn't. So that one was a little bit more the idea, but yeah, but it's another example of like I didn't really use world building because I just set it in our world. So much easier.
Oh, that's true. Yes, I guess having read it, I would have been very surprised if you told me that you did a character, or sometimes I can tell.
That one especially, it's a little different from my other ones. I was kind of making it a little more character oriented in some ways. I was trying to challenge myself to do something I hadn't really done, and my other ones are a little more funny, lighthearted, and as you could tell, that one's a little more serious. Since he
I like how I feel like all writers have a book or two that's kind of like our own personal outlier. I think it's interesting. I have a book that I wrote recently that was the first book I've ever pantsed. meaning, I guess for people who don't know the term, like I did not plot it ahead of time, or rather I could not plot it ahead of time. That was definitely new for me. That was kind of scary. It's funny because you never know this stuff unless you are behind the scenes working on the project. But I feel like when I look at the books on my shelf, and I just remember the process for all of them, and that's what sticks out to me about the stories.
That sounds terrifying. But you had no problems doing it? Did you enjoy it?
So I was able to plot it through, I would say, about the first quarter of the book. It was from there that it all sort of fell apart. I still really enjoyed writing it. And funnily enough, it's probably been thus far the novel I've gotten the least amount of, it's been the least broken to begin of every book I've ever written, which maybe is the universe telling me that this is what I always should have been doing. But I did not enjoy doing it, so I don't know if I'll ever do it again.
Yeah, you got to have fun. I mean, writing can be so hard just on a day-by-day basis that if you're not, you gotta embrace the parts that give you joy.
Oh yeah, especially because we're alone all day doing it too. Like we have to sit down and entertain ourselves this whole time. I mean, like of course I could walk out of the room and then I can, especially because my fiance is here because of COVID, he's here working all day. Of course I could leave and I could bother him and ramble to him about my book. But more often than not, it's just me all day at the computer, like trying to basically have fun on my own.
Do you feel comfortable sharing something like that, like mid-process? Because it scares me. I don't want anyone to see.
Like a snippet or something.
Like discussing anything, like maybe discussing a plot problem is different, but
I do have, it depends on who it is, who I'm talking to. Actually, my YA novel that's coming out this November, which is the start of a new series, it's duology, I actually co-wrote with my best friend, who is another YA author. And even if we're not working on that project, I mean, I'm constantly talking to her, like any problem that I have, any problem that she has, I feel like she hears about every single step of the process, whether she wants to or not, and vice versa. So it's nice that I feel like, and it's not even just her. I do have some other critique partners who I'm, happy to go to if I have something come up. But for the most part, I think especially if someone isn't a writer and is unfamiliar with, how tricky the process can be, I do think it's a little difficult to really convey like what it is that I'm frustrated about or.
I feel like I can never communicate like the whole story. And so it doesn't, like I'm saying it out loud and it's like, well, this doesn't feel right. It's like I'm leaving out half of it and you're not getting all of it. And they're like, oh, it's plenty. No.
Yeah, and then they'll be like, well, what about this to solve your problem, or this or this? And then I spend the whole conversation being like, well, I can't do that. I can't do that because of this thing I didn't mention. Like,
yeah, exactly. Things you've gone over in your head forever, and
Right.
I feel like half of or more of writing is just thinking about the book. Like, it's hard to explain to other people too sometimes that if you're not sitting there typing, you're still working. You're still daydreaming, you're still plotting, you're still working on problems. That's so much of the book.
I know. It's funny because when I quit my job and I transitioned to writing full time, I was like, oh, I'm going to have so much time to do stuff other than write for the first time. And I do, like, I've definitely developed some extra hobbies since then, but I feel like I still think about writing all the time. Yeah. It's still always on my mind, constantly. Yeah.
I think we're getting to the point where we're going to take other people's questions, but I have one more, and this is like super important. Are you going to do a Pokedex?
Well, there is a Pokedex.
Right. But like overall for the whole series?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. So yeah, I guess to illustrate what I meant by there is, in the back of the book, there is a small, like Beastly glossary. And it's actually funny you mentioned this because now that we're wrapping up book 2, my editor asked me if I wanted them to be cumulative or not, which I think is a little dangerous for my page counts if they start adding up book to book. We haven't come to a decision yet, but I have played with the notion of maybe putting the full version, if we didn't make it cumulative over the course of the series, putting them on my website or something like that. I love the idea of having some like fun extra content. And I did really enjoy coming up with the entries, though I will admit I did not come up with them as I went. It was kind of a last minute, especially for the first book, it was a very last minute idea. And so in about like 2 hours, I just was like, okay, time I have to write these all down. Yeah.
I'm just imagining like it being illustrated and stuff and just being amazing,
Oh, that would be so cool
right?
to see illustrated
Like an
versions of
old
all of
leather
them.
bound kind of book.
Oh, I would love that so much. No, that would be super fun. I would really enjoy to see that.
That's the kind of thing that it doesn't happen that often, but like I love props and everything. I tried to convince our publisher that like, especially for Revenge of Magic, which is about these 7 books of magic, we could make the covers for the series like the books of magic and stuff, and it could be like kids were opening it and getting the book, and there could be
That's so
spells
cool.
inside, and they're like, nah.
I will say, I feel like my editor was always like, "Oh, that's so cool," and then like everybody else at the publisher is like, "No." Like that's always how it goes with ideas like that.
I may have experienced that once or
That would have looked really cool.
twice.
I support your dream. Maybe a future special edition.
And I really hope that you do get to do like an encyclopedia of all the beasts and just be
Yes.
able to, people can just reference it as they're going. How cool would that be?
Right? Yeah. No, I think that'd be super fun. I don't really know if I have like another. I think the idea of doing maps would be kind of cool, but specifically in Wilderlore, like the Wilderlands aren't fully mapped out, so I feel like there'd be a lot of like black, a lot of just like ink everywhere, question marks. But I always love that kind of stuff, you know, the maps, the extra stuff in books. As a kid, and I think it's funny because I loved them as a kid, but as an author now, and I know how much convincing it can take to get them, I cherish them even more than I think I did then.
I get really impressed by the writers who can do it themselves because I have no artistic ability like visually.
I know what you mean. I feel like that I also see that more in middle grade, I've noticed. A lot of authors who can do their own illustrations. Oh, I wish.
Yeah.
Oh, if only.
And I think there's like a charm to it when it is kind of done messily, especially in middle grade, and it's like, oh, the main character did this, so it's okay if it looks messy and everything.
Oh, true.
But the professional ones, especially when they're done by writers, are just, oh, I'm so jealous.
No, I have one skill.
I do want to see your Excel spreadsheet of all the beasts and stuff because that's got.
Oh gosh. Well, it is very colorful. I like to think, therefore, it is artistic.
Do you have all of their different
something.
magical powers like in the various columns and stuff?
No, the columns, it's more of like strictly for plotting.
Okay.
So I write in Scrivener, which you know, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Scrivener software, it's kind of like Microsoft Word, but in a binder. So you also get to include other tabs that aren't the book. And actually, every book of the Wilderlore series is in the exact same Scrivener document, so I can just refer back very quickly. So I keep all that kind of like encyclopedia-oriented info. It's all in my Scrivener. But my Excels are purely for plotting. It's purely for mapping out the story.
Okay.
And I typically have columns, you know, like for the chapter. Then I'll have one like, this is what happens like overall in that chapter. And then I have a whole column that's like, this is Barclay's character arc. I always have one for chronology because I just saving my copy editors 50% of the struggle of figuring out, you know, how many days have passed since the story began. Plus Wilderlore, I gave myself an excruciatingly terrible calendar to work with. Yeah, so I have different columns for like subplots and character development and those kind of things. And then it's mapped out sort of like row by row, like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And it's very wide. It keeps going for a while. It gets bigger with every revision. At first, it's pretty small, and then it grows and grows and grows.
So you update it as you go, like through drafts?
I do typically update it as I go, especially because I end up rearranging stuff, and so some stuff just doesn't really make sense anymore. And I have reached the point where I just share them with my editor too. Like, sure, I figure it's helpful. You know, why not?
So I did in Story Thieves, there's in book 4, the main character, one of them, gets trapped in a choose your own adventure book. So that's the most experience I've had with having to like map something out and send them to my editor. I had to map out like all the different choices and how they all. It was a nightmare.
I have a friend who writes choose your own adventure books, and I cannot imagine how complicated that would be.
I would never do it again. But I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
Did Stephanie just
Oh, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't get away from it. Uh, so we have lots of questions in the chat. First one being, oh, sorry, is there a weird echo?
You're good.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. So first of all, I wish you could have seen my face when James, in the same way that you're like, oh, I'm glad to know Barclay versus Barkley. I definitely said Wilderlore, and I apologize to anyone at the Novel Neighbor this week when I've like hyped the book that I'm like, Wilderlore sounds better. Like, why did it never occur to me?
I emailed Amanda ahead of time to ask because I didn't know anything.
I'm many times this week. So many little unboxings that I get tagged in on Instagram. It happens all the time. It's fine.
It could go either way.
Yes,
Wilderlore makes more sense.
It's funny, and I have a book out called Ace of Shades, and I cannot tell you how many times I get tagged in reviews of Ace of Spades. So it's how it be.
Well, thank you. I'm going to pronounce it correctly moving forward, I promise. So we have some awesome questions in the chat. As you might imagine, Pokemon has gotten a lot of love throughout this. So one of those questions is, well, I guess, sorry, to go back to, there is a curiosity, Amanda, if the Shadow Game series is based on Yu-Gi-Oh, which I guess really comes to a question of like, are you Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, or is it
Okay, so as a kid, when I was in first grade, there were different cliques. Were you a Pokemon kid? Were you a Yu-Gi-Oh kid? Or were you a Digimon kid? And I was very much in the Pokemon crowd. My brother, my arch nemesis most of my childhood, was maybe both, but he definitely liked Yu-Gi-Oh. My fiance likes Yu-Gi-Oh and has told me that shadow cards, which play a vital role in the Shadow Game series, is a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh. I didn't know this when I wrote it because no, they were my enemies. That's so funny. I've never had someone bring it up to me. Only my fiance and my brother have ever mentioned it to me before. So like, I'm aware, but that's really funny.
Well, thanks for bringing it up, Mark. Shout out to Mark in the chat for asking that. Which, I mean, so James, just to keep going on that, are you Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh?
I'm Pokemon.
Oh, okay.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
So we can all stay on this. Like, we're all good. I still to this day have limited Pokemon knowledge because where I was growing up, Pokemon was like bad. Like, I remember getting in trouble for playing like Pokemon on the like playground at school. So like Pokemon Go was like a whole new world for me. I was like, okay, let's go.
Gosh.
Awesome.
Us authors, we were all such delinquents as children. Yeah.
Okay. And so, Katie is wondering, for both of you, what are your favorite and least favorite parts of the writing process?
Do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I mentioned that world building is really hard for me. It's not really the worst part. I would say my first drafts are usually my worst, like my least favorite part, because it's the part where you're having probably the most trouble kind of getting things out, trying to make it as perfect as possible, but still get through it so that you can go back and edit it and change it and make it better. So it's really the most challenging draft for me. So I'm always having to remind myself that it's okay to not be perfect on that first draft and just kind of get the story out, and then later I'll go back and edit it and hopefully make it better. And my favorite part is definitely when like you talk to somebody who's read your book, and it's like such a huge honor for them to have even read it. But if they've liked it, that's even a better compliment. It's just so amazing to have like your story show up in someone else's imagination, and they've thought of it in their own specific way and like based on all their experiences. It's just so the whole concept of reading something that like what used to only be in my imagination still blows my mind. So that's my favorite part.
I would say my favorite part isn't actually like actively working on the document. It's at whatever stage I'm at, it's opening up my Spotify playlist that I always make based on my books and just like lying on the floor and like feeling things. I would say that's probably my favorite part. I love just thinking about my books. I love having like every single event of the book like happening in my head at once. I like knowing all the secrets too, all the plot twists that my readers don't know yet. My least favorite part is pretty much everything that occurs later into the writing process, like the copy editing stage, the proofreading stage, anything that has to do with like pointing out my typos to me. I've been doing the copy edits right now in Wilderlore #2, and definitely a lot of my copy editor pointed out to me that I say the word furrowed his or her brows like 6 times in 35 pages. I don't love to be reminded of these things. Finding out that words that I assumed that I knew the meaning of didn't know the meaning of at all. That happens to me constantly. Yeah, so anything like that, it's always like a little bit of a, you'd think also like by book 5 at this point that there are only so many more like English language errors that I could encounter, but every single time I find out that there is actually something new.
It's actually such a refreshing thing to hear because I feel like there is the assumption out there that like authors, like to be an author, you have to know all of that. Like you have to know the English language, like the back of your hand. You have to know, like, I think we forget that there's all kinds of like editors that happen on your end that do that. So that's actually probably very helpful to some younger authors realizing they don't have to know it all, right?
Oh yeah. I also, working on my co-written novel, I actually was a bit of a grammar geek in school. Spelling, no. Vocabulary, no. But grammar, I really enjoyed. And it's funny, like writing with my co-author, and we'll be explaining things to each other, and I'm like, oh, well, in this case, like it's a subjunctive tense. Like I don't know if that's what we, no idea. And that's just, you don't need to know that stuff. It's not necessary. You save it for the copy editors. It's their problem.
It's so funny.
I feel like so many of us grew up reading all kinds of stuff that we saw a word that we didn't know what it meant, and we figured it out through context, and then that completely turns out to not be really what it meant, but maybe it worked in that context. I don't know. It's just something you never go back and think about.
Yeah, or when you can't say them out loud.
Yes.
Yeah, is that what you were going to say? Yeah.
Well, when you can't say them aloud, or like then you see the BuzzFeed like articles that are like all of the phrases you've been saying that are actually wrong, and you're like, cool.
Oh yeah, awesome. You've got another think coming. That things like that. Yeah.
Like, glad I don't remember which one's the actual right thing, so then I just kind of like drop off. Like, you have another thing coming. Like, let be like, yeah, no, I think the right phrase. We did also, before we get too far away from Pokemon, there was another question that came through. James, do you have any Pokemon references in Story Thieves?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mostly like Story Thieves is so much about jumping into books and dealing with everything I love about books that, like, for the most part, I would have kids ask if they could jump into video games or movies and stuff, and I always try to just say, if it's not in the books, it's up to your imagination, because I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't come down one way or another. So I mostly kept everything in books, but I could have totally. That was such a missed opportunity.
No, they're so weird. Oh, and that does remind me, I did want to, because this was such a lovely comment from Mark, back to your comment earlier when we were asking about writing process. You said world building is difficult for you, and this was a comment that came through like earlier in the conversation when you two were talking, and so I'm just going to throw it up there so that you can see the compliment that you got about your world building. So
that's really nice. Thank you.
I am sticking with the theme of not Pokemon, but other fan groups we might be a part of. Are either of you Potterheads? And if you are, what is your house?
I absolutely was, especially as a kid. I've read the books probably over 20 times each. I am a Slytherin, for sure. Not in the book sense, in like the BuzzFeed, the new
sense.
reclaimed sense.
Yeah.
In the book sense, I'm a Ravenclaw.
Yeah. Same. And I hate snakes. But like I went to the Warner Brothers studio tour in LA where they have the Sorting Hat, and they only have lines from the movies, so you can't be a Hufflepuff, but they'll put it on your head and stuff. And I was a Slytherin, and the curator was like, oh, sometimes we get kids crying when they become Slytherin, so if you want to go again, you can. I was like, no, I'm definitely a Slytherin. We're just ambitious people.
Yeah.
I always get Gryffindor, which makes me very upset because I think I'm a Ravenclaw. My friends are like, why are you upset that you're like, I need to go get an actual Sorting Hat. I don't trust myself when I'm filling out my own things. I'm very curious to see. I don't think I'm a Slytherin, so I think I'm the odd person out in this group, which is okay. I respect Slytherins. There's respect there. Kara is wondering if for both of you, Kara's wondering if you have a favorite book or series that you have read over and over again, which maybe was Harry Potter.
I've read Harry Potter a lot of times. Other series, to be honest, I'm not a huge rereader, so I think maybe that goes to show how much I enjoyed Harry Potter that I would reread it all the time. I'm cheating and looking at my bookshelf. There's definitely some grown-up books that I have reread a few times as well. I love all the books by Erin Morgenstern. I've read those a few times. I actually just finished rereading The Night Circus. I'm currently rereading a Naomi Novik book. Yeah, I go between age categories pretty broadly.
I would say there's a series called The Chronicle of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. And the first book's called The Book of Three, and it's about an assistant pig keeper whose pig tells the future, which is an amazing concept for a series. And it's one of my favorite series, and I've read it a million times. And Disney was going to make a movie series, or they talked about it a while ago, and then it sort of slipped off, and I haven't heard anything about it. But like, if you haven't read them, they're amazing.
And what again? The Chronicles of
Prydain. They're based on like Welsh fairy tales. The first book is called The Book of Three, and the second one's called The Black Cauldron, which more people have heard of because it was a Disney animated movie, which wasn't very good. But the books are amazing. I never bashed Disney either, but that one is not.
I thought when you first started that you were going to say there's this series called The Chronicles of Narnia, and I was going to be like, yeah.
That's heard of
that. Okay, for each of you, so for Amanda, who is your favorite character in Wilderlore, and who is most like you, and are they the same? And James, that same question, but story Thieves.
So in Wilderlore, my favorite character has to be Runa Raskar. She is basically the mentor kind of type character. I had a lot of fun writing her because honestly, it was really funny to write a mentor who was supposed to be my own age, who's like a mid to late 20-something, who's like trying her best, but who I know through the lens of the story is like the big grown up. I just had a lot of fun with her. And yes, I find her to be like just really, really cool, way cooler than I am, not a self-insert at all. And then the character who I most like, I would say, is probably Viola. Viola is super, super ambitious. Like her biggest dream is to succeed her father and become essentially like the head of the world of Wilderlore. And I was a very ambitious child. I feel like I can really relate to her.
Nice.
My favorite character in Wilderlore was Mitzi. she's the little dragon. She's adorable. And she doesn't like follow rules or anything, and then just like a spirit animal.
You know, Mitzi is actually inspired by my cat.
Yeah. Got that came through very clearly, actually. Very much a cat. Story Thieves, the character I most like is probably Owen, who is one of the main characters. He's the son of a librarian, and he just is a huge book fan of all kinds of stuff. So he's literally me in a lot of ways. He's questioning like why he hasn't become the chosen one, like why life hasn't opened up before him and stopped being boring and become like what books have promised him since he was young. He's just waiting for his opportunity, and then when he gets it, everything goes wrong. My favorite character, I have a bunch. There was a character in the third one, which is like my superhero book, called The Rotten Banana, who only talks in banana puns. That was a joy. That was such a joy.
That's so wonderful.
He irritated the other characters so much, and it brought me so much love and happiness to write. I don't know. Like,
I'm trying to. How quickly did you run out of banana puns?
Not as fast as you would think.
Oh, okay.
I spent a day just going through and coming up with as many bad banana puns as I could, and that was maybe my favorite day. He was definitely a big one. I also really love. There was another character in that named Earth Girl. She's like the opposite of Superman. She was sent from Earth before it exploded in some post-apocalyptic future, and she's just such a sweet, nice, optimistic person, which is not me at all. So she was a joy to write, and I just felt good like putting this character out in the universe as opposed to my sarcastic, like cynical characters.
My cat showed up. I think he heard me talking about him.
Nice.
Jelly. Yeah.
Let's see if I can say hi. This is Jelly Bean.
Hi.
Say hi, baby.
It's a good cat name.
He's in like a cuddly, quiet, sleepy mood now, which is very different than he is 90% of the time, which is literally running around our apartment at top speed and like jumping off the walls.
Oh, look at that face. There, lots of love for Jelly Bean. Lots of love for Rotten Banana. And I forgot to say there was lots of love for Pick the Plot when that came up earlier. So,
Oh wow.
just saying.
Say hi.
Ooh, great question. This is coming from Spark Doodles on YouTube. What's a trait about a character that makes you excited about them?
Like writing them or reading them?
Ooh. Clarification. I'm not sure.
With writing characters, I won't lie. I get a little thrill writing a character that has a trait that is such a popular trait to hate. Maybe they're kind of snooty. Maybe they're, something that's not just a classic mean bully, something that's just, you don't like those kind of characters. You don't want to read about them. I have so much fun writing characters who are just a little bit like that. Someone that I think of in the Wilderlore series, who appears in the first book, but actually has a much bigger presence in book 2. Look at him. Is the character of Cyril Harlow, who is Runa's arch nemesis. He's like this very pompous, very very like snooty kind of character, but I had so much fun trying to take such irredeemable traits and making it eventually maybe redeemable. I haven't decided.
Love that.
I like the sarcastic characters because they kind of just bring me joy. Like the more cynical and jerky they get, the more happy I am to write them. But also, I would say any character that wants to get into trouble and like cause problems is a ton of fun to write because they're pushing everything along, especially your main character who might be like pushing back and like being like, "Oh, I don't need to do this. That sounds like too much trouble," and you have the troublemakers like smash right off a cliff. So those characters are always a lot of fun to write and a huge help with the story.
That's awesome. Yeah, I find I'm like, especially in my like current mood the past year, like the more sarcastic the character, the better. Like I've seen my like reading shift like my moods and like if they're too upbeat, I'm like, no thanks, pass.
It's not
Like,
realistic.
yeah,
Nope.
yeah, that's not a thing right now. I just, Amanda, you can pass along to Jellybean that Jellybean is receiving a lot of fan love, new fan
You
base.
hear that, dude? You hear that?
Just like really crushing it with the audience this evening. So
Yeah.
um,
Hey, dude.
so
There you go.
oh gosh, I have to find this question. Sorry, I lost the question. I saw a great question. There's too much love for Jellybean. I can't go back and find it.
That's fair.
He likes to be held like a baby. He also likes it when I kiss his paws, which I will admit that I do, but it's very unsanitary. So that's what he's doing right now. He's like, why won't you do that? And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, it's a little gross.
I love that so much. This is like, wow, perfect. I feel like all of us are just living our best lives, including Jellybean.
It's very tangled in my headphones now.
Okay, are any of your characters inspired by people that you know in real life? And if you're able to say, sometimes I feel like there's characters that have been.
Oh yeah, the villain.
That you gotta like keep under wraps, right?
Oh, there it goes. Okay, all right. Honestly, just the character of Mitzi, inspired by Jellybean, who just jumped off my lap. Yeah, Jellybean's very mischievous. So I put a lot of that into Mitzi as well.
I have two in Story Thieves. Moira. I have a Moira in every series I've written for some reason. They're always different characters. It's because I like the name and forgot I used it. So now I have people being like, who's going to be the Moira in the next series? Like, oh.
Yeah, well, you have to have seen, I assume you've seen Schitt's Creek, right? The TV show?
No, I haven't.
Oh.
I know.
The most
I've seen
iconic
it, but I haven't like watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
So she was entirely in Story Thieves. She's entirely based on a friend of mine with a different name and everything. She's named Moira because she's the great granddaughter of Professor Moriarty, and she's like a criminal genius, but she's trying to be good. So she's struggling, but she like her mannerisms, the way she talks, everything was based on a friend of mine who is not a criminal genius, but probably could be if she wanted to be. So, but for the most part, like everybody else just comes out of a part of me in one way or another.
Love that. I feel like we have to say like shout out to James for being hip on Moira before Schitt's Creek. I mean,
having no idea.
Truly, because now like Moira is just like a household name, and I mean, who is to say Dan Levy didn't read your books and was like, I can't
imagine any other possibility.
That's the only possibility. That's what happened, and I'm going to. That's going to be the hill I die on. So there we go. Mark wants to know, and maybe this is, I don't know that we can even answer this question, but I think it's a great point, Mark. Why is it called middle grade or YA if it's fun for all ages? Which is a great point. They are fun for all ages, although maybe for parents so that they know content inside, right?
Yeah, kind of like a minimum age that it's okay for.
Yeah.
That would kind of make sense.
I think so.
It's like, unless you have any other insight. I don't actually even know how we came to the conclusion of it being called middle grade, but.
Yeah, I feel like, honestly, both terms have been what they've been for as long as I can remember, at least.
No idea.
Yeah, I don't know. But Mark, maybe we'll talk to Simon about it. Simon has got to have answers.
We'll just call them up. Yeah.
I actually want to talk to the Simon and Schuster too. That's who I'm calling.
I'll just call Schuster up. Yeah.
Isn't it Carly Simon?
What is it?
Isn't it Carly Simon? It's
like
her family. Yeah.
Yeah.
That still blows my mind.
The first time I heard that, in case anyone watching, like Carly Simon, like that. Yeah. I'm like pretty confident, right?
I think so. I don't know who Schuster is, but
Who is Carly Simon? I mean, other than
a singer. I'm gonna have to Google.
Like if you put Paul Simon, like maybe okay, yeah, but like
American singer-songwriter Carly Simon.
I'm pretty sure it's a singer-songwriter, but then I was about to like list a song, and I was like, I don't actually know. I'm second guessing myself.
No, I don't know her songs either. She's
I'm not willing to die on
Taylor.
that hill. Like that. I am. Oh, and Katie has a very practical question or practical answer to solve all of this too. It's also to help younger kids who are developing reading skills know which books they would be able to read and enjoy. So shout out to Katie for helping us answer this riddle. All right. Okay. Oh, fair. Okay, this is what I was going to say, and then I was feeling unconfident in it. Sorry, Amanda, you're getting called out. The song "You're So Vain" is Carly Simon. Do you know that song?
Oh,
You probably think the song
yes,
is
that's the extent of what I know. Yeah. You probably think it's about you, like, don't you? I think that might be all I know.
Yeah, there's like some echoing, like, don't you.
Yeah. Okay, I've heard that song. Yeah, I would never have been able to tell you.
Well, and that's what my first reaction was. And then for some reason, this is really going off the rails, but for some reason I was like, wait, it's not Call Me Maybe or like the Friday. I was like getting concerned that I was like mixing my
Your Carly's.
Yes, I got very nervous. So another question that came through, and then we'll wrap up with a final round of like some rapid fire, just like first reaction questions for the evening. Have you ever thought about either of your, like any of your books in both your wide expanse of books, being turned into a movie or like TV series or short series? And I guess if you have, the question is like, have you thought of who would be cast as them? Which is like, obviously there's a lot of books, so not that you have to cast all of them, but have you thought about that before? Or do you have a picture of who would play them?
Ooh, so I feel like my pipe dream, we'll say, for the Wilderlore series would be an animated television show in this similar vein as shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I don't know a lot about voice actors, so I don't know if I can go into that. And I feel like that cheats the actor question, which maybe is good for me because I don't know any actors at all. But that would be my ultimate pipe dream.
Yeah, I wish I'd gone first because that's exactly my answer too. Like, not only I love animation, but like you can do so much more, especially with fantasy in animation. It's so much easier.
Yeah, there's not a lot of fantasy in live action stuff at all.
No. It's so much easier to show magic and stuff when you're animating. That would be amazing. It's like Netflix for like 10 seasons.
Yes.
I'm in need of content. So, I mean, I think we're all in need of content, right?
Yes.
I'm like scraping the bottom of the barrel. So
It'd just be us doing a favor.
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, hear me out. Anybody who's listening, let's produce these. It would really be a favor to us all. Okay, so some rapid fire questions. Do you have a new quarantine habit?
Sorry,
I said habit. I meant hobby. Quarantine hobby.
Okay.
Really, like, makes a lot more sense.
Honestly, I know this is like a really positive one, but I got really into working out over the course of quarantine. Yes, well, actually at this desk while my fiance sits here all day at like 10 a.m., I'll like blast some like 80s rock music, work out like right next to him the whole time, bother him as much as possible. He loves it. That's the habit I picked up. Yeah.
Like the sad thing is this is my normal life. Like quarantine hasn't changed much because I was already here sitting in front of my computer. Like my fiance or she's my wife now. Everyone's been talking about fiancés. My wife is working in the same in our townhouse, so like having her around is amazing. But like otherwise, nothing's really changed. So I'm just home all day in my head, listening to music. I mean, I want it to end for everyone's health, but on the other hand, I'm like, I don't have to leave.
It's great.
It's like an introvert's dream.
Yeah.
I feel like we should have like this. I didn't really realize it until we started doing events again and asking this question. And like, truly, what we need are authors to come together and make like a tip book for how to survive like work at home, quarantine at home. Like, because I think y'all are really the experts at it.
I don't think anybody wants my advice. If they could see me all day in like my giant, I have like one of those comfy sweatshirts. You know, the ones that's like kind of a blanket, but like kind of a sweatshirt.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's some this or that questions. So, tacos or pizza?
Pizza.
Tacos.
Got both sides covered.
Yeah, way to go. To return to Pokemon, Pikachu or Squirtle?
Squirtle.
Normally Pikachu, but I would take a Squirtle squad Squirtle.
Yeah.
Specifically the Squirtle gang Squirtles.
Shout out to Squirtle. Way to make it. Summer or winter?
Winter.
Winter. Bugs.
I feel like that's such an East Coast answer. That's so fair. I should have anticipated that. Man, and I'm from Pennsylvania. Like, and I feel like I've really, gosh, I'm so over winter. Maybe it's just this year. Maybe this is what I'm surprised about. Maybe I just need like some sun.
I do feel like this is the winter that's never ended. It's been 15 straight months of winter, actually, regardless of how awfully hot last summer was. Yeah.
All my teenage years were in Iowa, where it's just, there are no hills, and it's just all sun beating down on you. And I'm like, no more, please. Just cold.
That's just all.
Oh, man. Oh, you know, I'm originally from Pennsylvania as well. And I actually saw that, I don't know if you guys have any vivid memories of this, but it's cicada summer this summer for the first time in 17 years. I have like, when I think of my childhood, I think of summer, like that's the summer, it's cicada summer. That's happening again. Yeah.
I accept that argument, and that alone could make me change my my response. Yeah. I know cicada summers all too well, and I could go without for sure.
Yeah.
Those are like horror films come to life for me. So
yeah. It's going to welcome us out of quarantine this year. So
Sure. Wow. Dragons or centaurs?
Dragons. No question.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was kind of hard to come up with like what would even be opposite a dragon. That would be cool. Like
that's fair.
That's a harder question, yeah.
For like existing, because they were like the best thing we could come up with. But dragons are just way too cool. They're too awesome. Especially when you give me a Game of Thrones dragon to think about, like I'm in. Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish?
Billie Eilish.
I'm gonna go with Taylor. Just to be, not to be contrary, but my wife plays her constantly, and it's slowly seeped in, and now I know all the words to every one of her songs, especially the last two albums she just put out. And so they're just, my heart beats to Taylor now.
Your wife would be so proud, I'm sure.
I almost got, the ALA had like a Taylor like Reed poster, and I tried to buy one, and someone stole it from me at some American Library Association thing, and I'm still a little broken up about that. Taylor,
those librarians, man.
Yeah. You can't trust them.
Rude. Vicious. Okay, last one. Do Marvel or DC Comics?
Marvel.
Yeah. There's like no comparison really anymore, right? Like post Endgame, like it's just Marvel all the way.
And like especially every Friday, because I'm really excited for tomorrow.
Shout out to Falcon and Winter Soldier. Yep.
That last episode was amazing.
I had absolutely no idea what you were talking about. All right. Yeah, cool.
It's Disney Plus. Oh.
Yeah. Disney's like gotten their claws into me and I'm just like in. So avoid it for as long as you can, Amanda, because once you know about it, it's just really difficult. You can never. Well, thank you so much for such a fun conversation. Thank you for your books. It's impossible to put all of the comments that they've gotten in the chat up on the screen, but there is so much love in the universe for all of your books. Like literally all of them have gotten a shout out in the chat. Especially though, a happy book birthday to Wilderlore. In your first middle grade. Welcome to middle grade. I'm so excited you're here and that we get more of it. And James, thank you so much for being here, for being such an awesome conversation partner, for bringing your stories to life for us. And you have, what is the next one coming out? Because there's so much, but we do get a new Revenge of Magic, right?
No, it actually just finished last month. So that series is over. So
we're done now, but
yeah,
we have something.
The next book, which is done, is a spin-off of Half Upon a Time. So I'm going back to fairy tales.
Okay.
And I have an enormous ginger cat in them as the Puss in Boots character. That he's like the horse, basically, for the main character. She rides him around and stuff. And I'm so excited because he's based on my old cat, who was like a ginger, long-haired cat.
I love that.
He's like my favorite character to write.
I simultaneously would love to ride around on a cat all day, but also that sounds absolutely terrifying.
Oh yeah, never going where you want, but it would still be amazing.
That's so funny. So yes, so no more Revenge of Magic for us, but new content coming from you that I'm confident will be just as amazing.
Thank you.
So yes, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Just another reminder that you can purchase the most recent books, but also the entire backlist for both of these authors from the novel Neighbor. And we do have signed book plates to go along with these titles. So please, you don't have to be in St. Louis. We ship, and so you can order them online or you can call the store. Send us a DM on social media, whatever we need to do to get these books in your hands, because they are awesome. So thank you for joining with us and being such an awesome audience that was so active. That's something I think that we all miss from virtual events, is like the live interaction. So it's always so great when you're also active in the chat. So we appreciate that. And we appreciate both of you for being here. And thank you so much.
Thank you
for having us.